Queen Elizabeth I was the offspring of love between King Henry VIII and his second wife Anne Boleyn, for whom he divorced Catherine of Aragon and fell apart from the Christian faith, and the Pope. King Henry Tudor had altogether 6 wives, almost all were either divorced or beheaded. Only Catherine Parr, his last wife, managed to outlive her husband. As we can conclude from the lecherous style of Henry's life, Elizabeth had also sibling. Her most well-known, 17 years older sister, was Queen Mary, also known as Bloody Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife and a Christian. Her brother Edward, son of Jane Seymour, died at an early age and never became a real king. Elizabeth entered the throne after Mary's death. However, her way to power was not a bed of roses. Elizabeth was born on 7th of September 1533 to huge disappointment for her father, who needed a male heir. She spent her childhood surrounded by nurses and servants in a palace in Hertfordshire. Although she changed the households, Hertfordshire remained her main residence. Away from the court, she was brought up not by her parents but by Lady Bryan, who previously looked after Mary. At that time, royal parents did not take part in upbringing of their children. Elizabeth would see them only on special occasions such as Christmas. When Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, miscarried her second child, who, as it was believed, was a boy so much awaited by Henry, she was convicted of treason and beheaded. Together with losing mother, Elizabeth was also deprived of her title and majority of the benefits. The situation was so bad, that Lady Bryan, her governess, had to write to the secretary Thomas Cromwell to ask for money on clothes, which Elizabeth had outgrown, as well as for suitable upbringing to suit her social position. The new and third wife of the king, Jane Seymour, interceded Elizabeth, and with time the princess was even allowed to attend the court. After the birth of Prince Edward, son of Jane Seymour and King Henry, Lady Bryan was sent to look after him. The new Elizabeth's governess became Catherine Championne, later called Cat Ashley. Cat was related to Elizabeth. She was married to one of Boleyn's cousins, which made her a great companion. Of the great importance was also the fact that Cat was a very well-educated lady and took great labor and pain in upbringing of Elizabeth in learning and honesty, as Elizabeth herself stated. Elizabeth was lucky enough to be surrounded by people who supported her in many ways, contrary to Mary, who was not so lucky. Also, the women King kept marrying were somehow connected to princes, either by family ties, age or religion. Thanks to such turn of events, she had always been closer to her father than any other heir of Henry. She was also favorite sister of Edward, who called her sweet sister Temperance and could share tutors of his stepbrother. Education of Elizabeth is of a great importance and will be discussed in a separate part. Although brought up away from the court, Elizabeth took after her father greatly. Her physical strength and resolution, her vicious temper, a delight in pomp, a passion to power and a general joy of life were typical features of Henry himself. She was aware of the similarity in character to her father and looked up to him. She also used to say, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Although being close to King, she was not to become the queen. Being reinstated in a line of succession, she was still the third to enter the throne. The first was the male heir, Edward, then Mary and finally Elizabeth, if the two latter did not have a male descendant. If not for the last wife of Henry, Catherine Parr, a motherly lady who did her best to reunion all the children with their father, both daughters would never be put back in the family and line of succession. When King Henry VIII died on the 28th of January 1547, Elizabeth lamented his death together with her brother Edward, who was then 9 years old, Elizabeth, 13. As Edward was too young to rule, the power was taken over by their uncle, Edward Seymour, who was proclaimed Lord Protector. Elizabeth being no longer one of female offspring of the King of England, but the second in line of succession, she became vulnerable to political opportunists.
Created using Powtoon.